Let's get to the story of the day. Story number 1. I'd been sick with flu-like symptoms for a day or so and was lying in bed with my sleeping husband. I'd dozed off, woken up, and felt feverish. My temperature was 102 when I took it with the digital thermometer next to the bed. The fever made me feel very weak, but it was a relaxing, almost pleasurable weak. Then I took some more Tylenol and tried to sleep again. I'm still not sure if I fell asleep or not, but I must have noticed what appeared to be a fever rising suddenly rather than gradually. I felt even weaker and more relaxed, but I was extremely heavy. Even my fingers felt like they weighed a ton. I really liked how relaxed I felt. I felt emotionally and physically disconnected from everything. I remember thinking how nice it was to be free of worries, pain, and fear. However, I noticed no joy, pleasure, or any of the positive counterparts. I was pleasantly surprised to discover that I enjoyed it, the void, that is. Then my husband came to mind, and I realized I needed to be with him rather than leave him to enjoy this void. I became terrified and tried to call out to him, but I assumed he couldn't hear me. In my head, I was screaming louder and louder each time. I thought I screamed the loudest in panic, but then I heard myself whispering to him and realized I hadn't been heard at all. I guess I gave up trying to get him to hear me. The next thing I remember is being in the middle of nowhere. I couldn't tell if I was in light or dark. I just remember nothing being around me except for him standing about 6 feet in front of me. He was silent for a while, as if he was giving me time to soak it all in. When I looked at him, he appeared to be about the size of a normal man, despite the fact that he was only 6 feet away. His height and everything else seemed normal, but he appeared enormous in another way, not in terms of size, but of glory. Glory was the first thing that came to mind because even though he appeared to be my size, I kept wanting to look way up, straight up at him instead of straight ahead, but I don't recall actually seeing anything larger than a man. Then I wondered why I didn't feel his everlasting love when I saw him like everyone else. As soon as I posed the question, the answer came to me. "That's not what I was there for," she said, flatly. Despite the fact that I understood the answer, I was still disappointed because I didn't feel his love, understanding, or mercy. I felt disappointed, cheated, and undeserving of these feelings about him, but I wasn't angry, just confused. I didn't get an explanation for why I hadn't felt these things, just one answer. Then he said he was going to show me something, as in prepare me for a heart attack or something. I was immediately paralyzed but not terrified, and he showed me thousands of visions all at once. The only way I can describe this experience is to take a handful of bees and drop them onto the floor. The visions came to me as quickly as the bees would hit the floor at the same time. Except for the first, I don't recall any of them. He was standing beside me on a mountain peak, looking down into a valley. Several hundred people were scattered around, as if preparing for some major event that was about to take place soon. Another mountain loomed on the other side of the valley, with trees greener than I'd ever seen with my own eyes. The same can be said for the color of the trees, and the grass in the valley was unlike anything I'd ever seen on Earth. The first thing I noticed was my vision, my physical vision's ability. The valley appeared to be many miles away from where I was standing, at least 10 or so, possibly more, but I could see every detail on both sides of the valley as clearly as I could on the other. If one of the people had a note in their hand, or if two people had a note, for example, I could have read them on both sides of the valley at the same time. I don't recall seeing anything specific, but I do recall how well I could see. I have a vague memory of an object in the middle of the valley and people going to and from it, as if they were preparing it, doing something with it or whatever. The object appeared to be the size of a standard-sized car and had a similar shape. I later discovered that the dimensions of the Ark of the Covenant are similar in shape and size, but this fact does not jog my memory. I also recall people wearing clothing that was different from what we wear today. I'm not sure what the difference was, but they didn't appear to be manufactured. Sandals and robes seem familiar, but I don't remember any of them specifically. They just appeared to be from the Bible or something. That was the last part of my vision before I awoke. I was still in bed with my husband. My fever was much higher than it had been. I needed to use the restroom, but I was too weak. I tried to get up, but I couldn't. I glanced at the alarm clock and noted the time. I don't remember what time it was, but I'd fallen asleep and woke up less than 5 minutes later. My fever was lower this time. I wasn't as weak, but I still needed to urinate urgently. I sat up in bed and took my temperature again. It was 104.3, despite the fact that I could tell it had dropped due to my increased strength and ability to think clearly. I thought the thermometer was off, so I took my temperature again, and it was 104.3. I turned off the thermometer, smoked a cigarette, and went to the restroom. Then I got back into bed and took my temperature again. It was 102. I'd been in the bathroom for less than a minute and had smoked the majority of my cigarette on the way and in the bathroom. Trying to judge from how quickly my temperature had gone down, I'm still not sure if my experience was only fever-induced or if I'd actually died momentarily. But I do know that it was an NDE. I was over the flu, or whatever it was, the next morning. God bless you. Story number 2. My near-death experience, of which I've had a few, mainly occurred at a time when NDEs were rarely documented, much less talked about. It was something I could only talk about with certain individuals who were already spiritually aware, or at least receptive. Yet, it still happened that, on occasion, one would accuse me of having had a hallucination because ignorance was still so prevalent at that time. In recent years, however, the NDE has been not only talked about but also documented and has received widespread media interest. Scientists, physicians, psychologists, ministers, mystics, etc. have all congregated together to obtain a deeper understanding of the phenomenon of the NDE. It is something that many people, such as myself, have been through, and we've been called back to teach and share our experiences with others. By all rights, one might wonder why so many of us have been brought back while others remain on the other side. This is mainly due to the fact that we were needed to fulfill and complete something significant in our lives, as well as to honor a special mission to help humanity finally come to the realization that there is indeed no death. We simply move on and continue to evolve in our journey back toward the light. Since people are always inquiring, what happened and what is it like? I'll try to convey what happened to me that led to one of my NDEs, as well as what I experienced from the other side. Please excuse me if this doesn't fit into a tidy chronological order, as there's no such thing as linear time on the other side. Everything is always experienced in the now, including the past and future. Herein, I'll attempt to explain and recapture my experiences on the other side and how they affected me. I will humbly attempt to grasp the proper words for describing this most lofty experience that had a profound impact on me. The experience. In the mid-70s, I was dealing with a terminal disease, colon cancer, and my life was ebbing away until I finally lapsed into a coma in late December. As others observed that I was in a coma for 5 weeks, then thought dead, I was having a completely different experience. One would look at my body and think that I was unconscious, asleep, with no awareness of what was going on or anything. Yet, I was very conscious and profoundly aware because, in truth, we never really sleep, only our bodies do. We are always aware and active, on one level of consciousness or another. Just the fact that we dream while asleep is an indication that our consciousness is always active. And indeed, our bodies need to rest so that we can tap into and experience other aspects of our consciousness and being. The best way I can describe the transition between being alive on the physical plane and the passage to the other side is like passing from one room to another. You do not cease to be or lose consciousness. Your consciousness simply shifts from one vantage point to another. The experience changes, your outlook changes, and your feelings change. And the feelings were profound, for me. It most certainly became that peace that surpasses all understanding. My transition was from gradual as a result of having a terminal disease to a sudden one incurred from accidents, heart attacks, etc. What I experienced then was that, as the disease progressed, I got to a point where my consciousness was already making the transition from one realm to the other, being more aware of other realities in other dimensions, etc. Therefore, I could no longer comprehend anything written on a page, for example, because it no longer meant anything to me in my changed state of consciousness. I had already departed from the third dimensional realm for the most part, and my awareness encompassed other things. On the other hand, color and sound became more vivid. But again, much of this did not involve the physical plane. As I progressed more and more in my crossing over, I was aware of being in a whole new realm. However, I never thought of myself as being dead. In fact, I felt more alive than ever. Now, I was acutely aware of the divine presence, the creator and spirit guides all around me. There was a profound realization of never being alone and always being in communion with spirit and other beings in this awesome and magnificent realm. The most profound aspect of the NDE for me was that of being completely enveloped in divine love and also being totally free of fear. There was no question that love was everywhere, that I was completely protected and safe, and that everything would work out just as it should. There was never a feeling of being isolated or alone. This was a special opportunity to experience being at one with the all, never separate and never at a loss. I knew with total certainty that everything was evolving exactly the way it should, and that the ultimate destiny for every living being is to return to the source, the light, or pure love. At the age of 20, I underwent what should have been a routine operation. But there were complications, and I died on the operating table. My experience was that I felt myself being drawn out of my body at tremendous speeds. It was like being sucked up a tunnel. I found myself in the universe. This is the only way that I can describe what happened. I was a part of the universe. I could see the earth to my right, but there were many versions of it. They were all following one after the other, forming a circle, and they were in various stages of evolution. I was a part of the stars, and although I did not have a physical body, I felt more real than ever before. This feeling has persisted as much as I can recall, but not as intensely as the actual experience. It is as if I learned how it feels to truly be alive as opposed to just existing. I also experienced a profound sense of love. The only way I can describe this is that it was everything. This seems really inadequate, but it was so intense that putting the experience into words just doesn't work. It is something that I felt so thoroughly that I just couldn't express the feeling in words. The whole thing was truly beautiful. I then heard a voice, which came from a huge bright white light towards the left of me, saying that it was not my time yet, that I had things to do, and I felt myself being pulled back. When I came around from the operation, I was told that I had died. I did not talk about my experience until I was studying for my first degree. A tutor began to talk about NDEs, and I realized that I was not alone. This experience has changed my life, and most definitely for the better.